All right, we roll on here with Just Saying on this Monday. Hope you guys are being thawed out wherever you are across the Deep South, especially here in Mississippi and the Magnolia State. It was a busy sports weekend, though. To kind of bail us out of the cold weather, being shut indoors, Ole Miss, Mississippi State in baseball. Jackson State kicking off the Deion Sanders era with a 53-0 win over a team that I've never heard of, Edward Waters, to be honest with you. Joining us on the KDMC Guest Line now, Sports Illustrated columnist. He is Ross Dellenger. I used to call him Dr. Ross when he was in Jackson. Can we still keep that going? Is that okay?
Sure. I don't have a doctorate in anything. Maybe drinking bourbon. That's about it.
Well, we enjoyed you in Jackson, and you've moved up the ladder at Sports Illustrated now, and you get to cover a lot of different things, and read your article on Will Hall a while back, the new Southern Miss football coach. Really good job there. Enjoy your stuff as always. And you were in town over the weekend for the Jackson State season opener. Nothing going on yesterday, right? Jackson State, Deion Sanders, Troy Aikman shows up. Worst winter storm to hit the area in 3 decades, no running water at the stadium. And then there was a possible theft of some of Deion's belongings during the ball game. Nothing to see here, right?
That's right. Yeah. Anytime, I covered Jackson State for 2 years, back in 2010, 2011. And I came away those 2 years in the SWAC with certainly a lot of unbelievable stories that really can only be found in the SWAC. And this will be right up there at the top.
What can we really take from the game yesterday against Edward Waters? I saw your tweet yesterday, Jackson State, and I can't remember what the score was, and then you referred to Edward Waters as the NAIA team with one win from a year ago. What can we really draw from yesterday, or what can you draw from yesterday's win over Edward Waters for Jackson State?
Pretty much absolutely nothing. It was a veritable scrimmage. I think there are probably quite a few, and I'm serious about it, Mississippi high school teams that probably could beat that team that we saw Sunday out of playing Jackson State. They're an NAIA program out of Jacksonville, won one game last year. Their first pass play of the game was about 20 yards off, and then they handed off for a couple of yards, and then their second pass of the game on third down was right into the hands of a Jackson State player who dropped it, and that was indicative of the rest of the way offensively for them. So I don't take much at all into the on the field performance. It's tough to gauge, and it'll probably be tough to gauge next week too when Jackson State plays Valley.
How do you think Deion, of course, with you covering Jackson State and being a part of covering the SWAC when you were in Jackson, how do you think he's being received by some of the coaches? And I'm asking you to obviously get in other people's minds here, because when he walks through a door, he walks through a door with a lot of fanfare, a lot of sizzle, a lot of glitter. How do you think that's being received in the SWAC by the coaches across the board?
Yeah, I obviously now don't spend too much time covering the SWAC. And in fact, that was my first game since 2011, I believe, first SWAC game. So I would just be guessing, and I'm guessing that there is probably a decent amount of jealousy among the other schools, because Deion is Deion, and he is going to talk a lot, and he is going to probably get things, whether it be sponsors for new facilities or commercials or new uniforms, that other SWAC teams are not. I had in there recruits as well, of course. He signed the best class in HBCU history, basically, this past year, and the best class in the FCS. I think the class was ranked in the 80s among all schools, including FBS schools. So I am sure there's a little bit of jealousy there. There's probably a little bit of animosity already building.
Ross Dellenger from Sports Illustrated joining us on the KDMC Guest Line. While I've got you on the phone, I've got to ask you about the rest of the state of Mississippi, because you did a story on Will Hall, obviously at Southern Miss. Great story there. If folks haven't seen it, I encourage you to read it. You've got Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. You've got Mike Leach at Mississippi State. Now you've got Deion at Jackson State. I mean, When did Mississippi become like the go-to state for college football coaches, a big-name college football coaches? When you heard about Leach and Kiffin and then Deion coming to Jackson State and having covered sports in the state, what was your first thought?
Well, it was, at the time, I think Southern Miss had an opening, head coaching opening, and Leach was hired and Kiffin was hired, and then Deion hadn't gotten hired. And I was waiting to see who Southern Miss was going to hire. Could they hire some celebrity that would outdo all those three? And instead, they had the most, obviously the most quiet kind of hire there was in Will Hall. But I think Will, and I think people around Southern Miss will tell you they're really excited about that hire. And I think a lot of people believe that he'll do great things. As far as Mississippi's coaching hires, it was quite a cycle last year in producing. I would guess three of the most entertaining, maybe the most entertaining coaches in a single state as far as college coaches. I don't know that anybody can stack up with those hires. And I think part of it is, after spending so much time in the state, is that Mississippi has to be different, especially Mississippi State and Ole Miss, when they're competing in the SEC with programs that have richer history, more money, a bigger fan base, just bigger donors. You've got to be a little different. And Mississippi's always been that way. You go back to some of the old, the Mississippi State Ole Miss coaches in the past, and you've just got to kind of be different, not just schematically, but you've got to be different in your approach. You've got to set yourself apart because you don't have maybe the resources that some other schools like the Alabamas and the LSUs and Floridas have. And I think Mississippi's done that with Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin, and they're both similar in a lot of ways. They certainly are true mavens of social media, and schematically, offensively, they're very creative and they're fun to watch and they're entertaining, and they're somewhat outspoken too publicly. Sometimes that can end poorly, as we've seen in Starkville a little bit, but they're different, and Mississippi has to be different. Was
there a hire in the SEC that surprised you, that maybe you went, okay, so they're going that route? Was there a coaching move in the rest of the SEC that stood out to you and got your attention? Well,
I'm trying to go through the hires in my head. On this trip, I've been away from home for about a week. I started in North Alabama and wound my way down South Alabama, South Mississippi, and then back up again to Jackson. And I stopped through Auburn and met with Brian Harsin, the new Auburn coach. That was certainly a surprise, for sure. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But at the same time, I think it was, I think many will agree, it's a pretty strong hire. But it just kind of came out of nowhere, And then you got Shane Beamer at South Carolina, which, again, probably not a surprise. His name was in the mix fairly often, but the fact that they pulled the trigger on somebody without really any coordinator, certainly no head coaching college experience, but not even a coordinator experience, was certainly a surprise. And Josh Heupel at Tennessee certainly wasn't a surprise. I think a lot of people saw that probably coming. Danny obviously hiring him at UCF, but that it was a hire where I think that they were down the list. It sure sounds like it. Danny can say what he wants. That was the number one. Only one guy was offered the job, but we know that those things don't happen like that. So out of all those, certainly the most surprising to me probably did come in Auburn. But I think it might be the best one. We'll see.
Hey, look, I hope we can do this again. It's just been a long time since we've been able to catch up since your days of covering sports here in Mississippi. And I hope when we have a little more time that we can kind of dig into some more things and you'll jump back on with us sometime.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
He's Ross Dellenger with Sports Illustrated joining us on the KDMC Guest Line. We take a break, come back with more right after this on the Spirit Media Network.